A Merric's Tale by Margs Murray. Read to you today by Margs Murray. Chapter 1. Hoofbeats and Zebras. Forget the exotic explanations, Waverly. What did Dr. Seabury tell you? When you hear hoofbeats, think horses, not zebras. When you see something with an obvious answer, that is usually correct. Grandma's medical diagnosis is the most obvious, even if it is the hardest to accept. This is true for most things in life. Stop being so stubborn. Dad's eyes zeroed in on me over a steaming cup of coffee. I was not a stubborn person. Passionate? Yes. Caring? Yes. Stubborn? Never, but I couldn't let this go. No, that can't be true. If the whole world were horses, then there would only be a handful of diseases. Dr. Seabury is wrong. My voice raised, and a stray curl flopped into my field of vision. I tucked it behind my ear and continued. I mean, someone must be the zebra. The whole premise must be wrong. Otherwise, other diseases wouldn't exist. For instance, there wouldn't be alien hand syndrome. There wouldn't be Kuru. Dad smiled and leaned forward in the booth. You get Kuru by eating human brains. Really? Bolstering your argument by citing cannibalism? An elderly couple at the next table glanced up from their breakfast. Not the point, I said, lifting my feet from the sticky linoleum floor, and I leaned back in my seat. Nearly impossible things happen every day. Otherwise, no one would die of shark attacks, and no one would win the lottery. The impossible seldom happens, but it happens. Alzheimer's. Your grandmother has delusions of grandeur, extreme memory loss. She can't remember her husband of 40 years, and she suffers from hallucinations. Now, I love Helena like she was my own mother, but you can't deny the symptoms. Hallucinations are strange shadows, I replied. I know the symptoms of Alzheimer's, Dad. I heard my voice getting louder and faster, but I couldn't stop. But they don't explain her other symptoms, like her scorching body temperature or the fact she has retained most of her memories for the last 7 years. I didn't say she's not sick, just not with Alzheimer's. Dad cleared his throat and looked around the cracked kettle diner. Our argument carried over the hum of the morning crowd. Customers leaned in over their blueberry pancakes and bacon ends to get a better view of the history teacher and his daughter. Brazen folks twisted in their booths. In our little town, everyone knew everyone. My poor mother would soon get a play-by-play at Grandma's hair appointment. I didn't care. This was an argument worth having. I knew what Dad would say next, the linchpin to his argument, the nail in the coffin. His voice clear and sure of victory, he said, Yes, but how can you argue with the MRIs? The brain scans all show the correct diagnosis. They're wrong, okay? I said, biting my nail. I fell back on my only explanation for the brain scans. It was a weak argument, and I knew it. Suddenly embarrassed, a blush crept over my cheeks, and any second the creeping would erupt across my face and turn me into a blotchy red tomato. I wish I had a poker face for times like this, but my blush always gave away my inner emotions. I also wished I was smart enough to find a better explanation. Finally, I wished I had a medical degree instead of a newly printed high school diploma. Didn't matter. I wouldn't stop. Grandma was worth fighting for. And I had fought for Grandma to anyone who would listen. My parents, sick of arguing, took me to meet Grandma's specialist, but the second I walked into the office, I had known I didn't have a prayer. His walls were plastered with awards and diplomas. On his desk, he had a leather cup filled with gold medal pens. Yup, no Bics for this guy, no sir. He was a specialty guy through and through. Special awards, special degrees, special pens. He was special, all right. And no specialist that special was going to take the word of someone still driving on a junior license. Sold on his own diagnosis, he didn't want to hear it from me. Dad ruffled up his brown hair and gave me a sad half-smile. He knew he had bested me, and he knew I knew it. No need to make me feel worse. Okay, Wavy, let's call a truce before Kat kicks us out. Kat, our usual waitress, took her cue and grabbed the pot of coffee and 2 menus and came right over from behind the counter before the fight started up again. She poured Dad's refill and handed us the menus. So what'll be this morning? The regulars, we said more or less together. Kat laughed and put her pad back into her large pocket of her sea green uniform, and she tucked her pencil behind her ear. I don't even know why I gave you these. Where's the other 2 in your crew? She asked and took the menus back. Simone took Helena to the salon, Dad said. Like they even need it. Kat said, and she put her hands on her waist. Together, Grandma and Mom were the image of beauty, tall and slender with silky blonde hair. Unfortunately, I didn't have it either. Most of my genetics were closer to Dad's shorter stature and frizzy brown hair. They should be here any moment, I told her. And how is Helena doing? Kat's voice lowered, and she placed her hand over her heart. People often did that when asking about Grandma, and it could get annoying, a whole town grabbing at their chest, but honestly, our family was very fortunate to have their support. We greatly appreciated it because Grandma could be a handful. See, Grandma's delusions weren't like the standard Alzheimer's delusions. Her delusions convinced her she was the princess and royal heiress to the Kingdom of America. This created certain complications. Luckily, everyone in town was willing to help our family and go along with her wild demands. Helena's the same, thank God, Dad replied. The exact same for the past 7 years, I grumbled. I mean, if it's Alzheimer's, shouldn't she be getting worse? They ignored me. Dad added, Better put in an order for their meals, too. They'll be along soon. Sure thing, sugar, Kat said, making her way back towards the kitchen. Oh, the joys of having only one place to eat in town, said Dad, and he picked up 2 napkins from the dispenser, handed me one, and laid his in his lap. I folded the napkin into a fan. Dad, don't you find it odd that someone with Alzheimer's would recognize if you changed the order? Not if they find comfort in small things being the same. Yes, but how can she remember things down to a fine detail? She knows when I move a book on the shelf. She remembers license plates of bad drivers. And she knows her appointment schedule better than anyone else. I can't even remember stuff like that. That's because you have more going on in your life right now. Starting college soon, graduation parties, midnight movies. Your brain is still developing. Her brain is trying to hang on. Or maybe the diagnosis isn't right. Dad pursed his lips and then added, Look, kiddo, you're passionate, I'll give you that. And you're wrong, I said with a nod. Well, one of us is, Dad retorted. There was no use going on with this argument, so I took my phone from my purse and checked my notifications. A clang from a nearby table brought my attention back to the diner. A new busboy, a young man I didn't recognize, wiped down an empty table. He had a long pink scar from his temple down to his jawline. His eyes landed on me, and my eyes darted down to my phone. He must have seen me looking at his scar. I let my hair fall over my eyes and my now crimson face. I mean, the scar was very noticeable, but I still shouldn't be looking. I understood what it was like to have a whole room stare in your direction. Dad saw him too and grumbled, Not today, buddy. It's the eyes, Dad. Or he saw me staring and knows I'm an awful human being. I hope for once it was the eyes, because people always notice them. Everyone commented on them. So interesting, just like your mother and grandmother. Always. Gray's an interesting color, but personally, I would have loved to have bright green eyes the exact color of grass after a spring rain. Nope, I got the color of nickel. Dull nickel. No, it's not, Dad countered. You're a beautiful young woman. I'm getting you pepper spray before you leave for college. No, make that a taser. Dad, my cheeks were lava. I cast another secretive look at the new man and whispered to Dad, Strange we don't know him. We know everyone in Barton. It's a town. People come and go. But in Barton? People are usually introduced at barbecues and football games. I can't remember the last time a stranger just showed up. The guy went to the kitchen and returned with a bin for dishes. People come and go all the time in normal places, Dad sighed. Maybe you need to get out of town for a while. As you have reminded us repeatedly, you are almost an adult. So you're saying Barton's not normal? I asked, and we both laughed. Well, kiddo, no. In normal places, not everyone knows your name. There's more to do than barbecues and football games and cow tipping. No one cow tips. It's not a real thing. Sure it is, just 'cause you never. They sleep on the ground. Dad took another long drink of his coffee. Still, Wavy, I think college will do you some good. I picked up my straw paper and twisted it between my fingers. Can't wait. I smiled as the lie passed my lips. I'd never say it out loud because I was almost an adult and I didn't want to sound like a kid or upset my parents, but I wasn't excited for college. I mean, in theory, college sounded great, but it didn't come without its complications. When I left, who would advocate for Grandma's correct diagnosis? No one. My parents believed the doctors. Without me, no one would question it. Syracuse was only 2 hours away, but I wouldn't be able to come home every day or even every weekend, especially when winter started. And I would never mention this to my parents because it would give credence to Grandma having Alzheimer's, but deep down, I was afraid my absence would somehow make me disappear from her mind, just like Grandpa had. I mean, I kind of thought she'd remember me because I was her favorite person, and her memories had been steady, but it felt wrong to risk it. Not wanting to get into any of that with Dad, I simply added, "College will be great." I remember my college days. Wait. A huge smile took over Dad's face, and he went to his feet as Mom and Grandma, both freshly made up from the salon, came through the door. The whole restaurant followed Dad's lead and stood up, and gave Grandma a deep bow. That is, everyone except for one person. The new busboy didn't move. He stared in confusion. This impropriety caught Grandma Helena's attention. "Bow down, you impertinent fool, or prepare to suffer the dire consequences." The busboy froze. "I am Her Royal Highness, Princess Helena Elizabeth, Princess of Connecticut, Countess of Massachusetts, Duchess of Pennsylvania, Duchess of Maine, Countess of Maryland, Lady of the Centrals, and Stewardess of the North." Dad laughed. Grandma was a presence, dignified, gracious, and a bit crazy. The poor new guy didn't know how to respond. Grandma stepped forward. The movement caught the man by surprise. His bin of dishes slipped from his hands and crashed to the floor. The silverware cylinder rolled across the checkered tile. He stared at her, mouth agape. He needed help and fast before Grandma blew up at him. I ran over and took the guy's arm and assisted him into a sloppy low bow, whispering to him, "Sorry, she's not well. She thinks she's the second in line to be the Queen of America." Kat rushed out and helped me pick up the silverware while the guy remained bowed. "Sorry, Kevin. I should have warned you. I assumed, well, everyone in town knows about Helena. Sorry." Kat took the bin in one arm and wrapped the other around Kevin's back and led him to the kitchen. I wiped my hands on my jean shorts and assisted Grandma to our booth. "Well, I never." Grandma sat down next to me with a huff. My mom spoke up to Grandma. "He's new, Mother. You could have been nicer." "Simone, new people don't just show up in Barton," Grandma said. "There is a protocol. They must be vetted and introduced at a formal setting. Things are amiss. The royal guard must be notified. The princess was kind to help him, but I fear I should have already taken care of the man." Dad laughed. "Oh, Helena, I do love you." "And I love you, Matthew, even if your feeble attempts at propriety are sometimes as brazen as that young man's." Grandma patted Dad's hand from across the table. "Family is family. Let's not fight." And our family was small. My mother and father were both only children. Grandma and Grandpa Wilson lived 5 hours away in Gettysburg. Most of the time, it was just the 4 of us versus the world. I didn't know what they were all going to do when I left for college. Grandma turned to me. "Do you know that man? He looks too old to be from your school." "He is," I agreed, because if I had to guess, the man was at least 25. I was about to mention it when somewhere outside came a slight buzzing like 2 bees flittering around a flower, light but there. I shook my head, sure I must have imagined it. "Let's drop it, okay, Mother?" Mom told her. "It's nothing to worry about." "Simone, you never worry about oddities, but you should. I will not always be here to protect you, and goodness knows my gifts, the family gifts, skipped you." Dad mouthed, "Thank God," as Kat returned carrying our breakfast tray. "Okay, that's 1 stack of blueberry pancakes for our little Wavy, egg white omelet for the beautiful Mrs. Wilson, the special for the historian, and for your Highness, confetti-ready waffle madness surprise." Grandma's eyes widened as she gazed at the waffles and whipped cream configured into piles like castle spires topped with sprinkles. She smiled at Kat. "Well done. My compliments to the chef." "Sure, Your Royal Highness," Kat replied. The sound came again, only stronger and different. Like static on a radio turned to an off station. I shook my head. It must have been my ears. But then Kat's hand moved to her ear. "Do any of you hear that?" The static was no longer distant, and everyone peered around for the source. A strange sensation, like déjà vu, made my skin prick. "I hear it," a man called from a different table. "Oh, no." And Dad gave a groan of recognition. "What?" I whispered. "What is it, Matt? Is it some sort of machinery or—" Kat stopped talking mid-sentence and turned towards the door. She wasn't the only one. I looked around. Not one person talked. Voices fell silent, caught in an invisible spider's web too thick and dense to penetrate. The clanking of glasses on linoleum tables and the scrape of forks on plates stopped. The only sound was the barest of breathing. The air thickened. Every face turned to the same spot, the open door. A slight man with white hair entered the diner. He wore a full suit, dark gray with a purple lapel. His nose was high in the air and his shoulders back. He looked powerful and yet so very thin a child blowing a pinwheel might have knocked him over. 2 bodyguards flanked the little man as the world held still. Great Uncle Bullard flicked his wrist, and after another eerily silent moment, my family woke from the strange stupor, if only slightly, as he crossed the room. The rest of the diner still seemed rooted in their positions. Many appeared to need a glass of water. Dad sat, arms crossed, with a scowl of annoyance and repulsion on his face, while Mom chewed her lip as if waging a mental battle over the surprise visitor. Grandma spoke first. "Hello, Bowley." Great Uncle Bullard made a small bow to Grandma. "Helena, it has been far too long," he said, enunciating every syllable in each word. Mom, coming back to herself, stood up and offered her one and only uncle a hug. Bullard endured the embrace, patting Mom's arm, and she let go. "This is such a huge surprise." No kidding. Great Uncle Bullard seldom visited, and when he did, he set up the occasion via messenger carrying a wax-sealed invitation to a private meal at a rented town hall. One lonely table in an empty location, painfully awkward at the best of times. She added, "It's nice to see you." Great Uncle Bullard turned his gray eyes from her and fixed them upon me. "Yes, so we shall see." "Hi, Uncle." Not wanting an awkward hug, I waved from my seat. "It's good to see you." "Uncle, what are you doing here?" Mom asked. I was thinking the same thing, and I bet Dad was too. "Are you sick? What happened? Is everything all right?" "Are you dying?" Dad asked a little too hopefully. "Matthew!" Mom said as she returned to her seat. I scooched over in the booth to make room for Uncle Bullard next to Grandma. But Bullard's bodyguards had already gotten him a metal chair for the head of the table. They placed a white cloth down before Bullard sat, as if the diner itself may contaminate him. Dad rolled his eyes at Bullard for taking the head of the table, but it wouldn't have mattered where Great Uncle Bullard sat. Dad's dislike for Bullard was clear. Something had happened between them before I was born. Tight-lipped, Dad never mentioned the incident, and instead pretended Bullard didn't exist until the next visit. Mom placed her hand on Dad's arm, politely warning him to behave. Great Uncle Bullard had done a lot for her, and Mom was grateful. He'd paid for all of Grandma's treatments, doctor's appointments, and her night nurse. "Everything is all right, isn't it, Uncle?" There was a tightness at the table as we all held our breath, waiting for his answer. "Waverly has graduated." "Yes, last week," Mom said with a smile as she put 2 and 2 together. "You received your invitation, I hope." He nodded again and pulled a small, wrapped box from the inner pocket of his jacket. He placed the box on the table. "Is this for me?" I asked, picking up the box and jiggling it. It sounded as if it had a necklace inside. "Is it a family heirloom?" I always loved my gifts from Bullard. Expensive dresses, cell phones, computers. Each year I received something awesome from him, so I knew my graduation gift would be amazing. It could be keys to a car or diamonds. I unwrapped the paper and popped open the lid. I sat and stared. Dad leaned over the table to see the gift. "What?" What exactly? For the box held the last thing I would have expected. and it made me question my uncle's mental health. I flipped the contents into my hand. Pieces of dirt and pebbles dropped onto the table. Dirt? No, America. The real America. The America I own and run. Bullard's voice was as cool as ice on a winter's pond. I stared at the mess of dirt in my hand. I don't understand. That makes two of us. Mom picked up the empty box and searched it herself. Finding it empty, she used the box to sweep the pieces of dirt off the table and away from our now cooling breakfast. With a shrug, she handed the box back to me. Are you okay, Uncle? I am here to make Waverly an offer now that she is of age. I ran my finger through the dirt. An offer to farm? Uncle Bullard shook his head. A position with my company, and an opportunity to get to know me better. Testing soil? Befuddled, I took my finger and ran it through the dirt again, and I stopped. Wait, is this contaminated? Whoa, wait! Dad brushed the small remaining bits of dirt onto the floor. A job offer? What are you talking about? Our kid just graduated high school. She still has college. We don't even know where you work, the city, or heck, even the country. I mean, what do you even do for a living? America. America isn't a job, Dad snickered. I am one of the most important men in the country. That was a bold statement. I couldn't imagine Bill Gates or Warren Buffett saying that about themselves, even if it was true. Bullard continued. I am a world leader. I have seen all this world and then some. I have traveled further than any of you can imagine, and I have accomplished things you have never even dreamed of. Mom and I stared at one another. I could tell we were both wondering the same thing. Had Bullard gotten sick like Grandma? Did he suffer from delusions of grandeur like his sister? A sign that perhaps this form of illness was genetic? Dad drummed his fingers on the table. Funny. You'd think we'd see your name on the news then. Only if I want to be seen will I be, Bullard told him. I am not known in your world. Are you sure you're all right, Uncle? Mom asked. He's fine, Grandma said for him. Her ringing endorsement wasn't helping. My niece knows so little about me or the rest of my family. I would like to remedy that. Family? There are more in our family. Are you married? Do I have an aunt? Cousins? I asked, for I'd always longed for a larger family. My parents struggled for years to have a second child, but no luck. As far as I knew, I didn't even have third cousins twice removed. Do we, Uncle? You've never mentioned other family members, Mom said. You've never even mentioned your parents before. Grandma and Grandpa trips. God, I miss them. What were they like? I asked them all. I wish I'd met them. So, you are interested, Bullard stated. In the family, Dad spit out. Yes, I'm interested in the family and their health, like Grandma. Did she always have a high temperature? She gets so hot, often over 107 degrees. That's enough to kill a person, but it's her normal. Bullard paused before replying. I recall she was always warm, like many members in our family. Wait, so more members of the family run hot. Who? My great-grandmother. Did she get sick too? What about your dad? Aunts and uncles? The corners of Great-Uncle Bullard's mouth turned upward in what was supposed to be a smile, but wasn't. He'd liked the question, liked that I asked it, but he didn't answer right away. It was as if he was enjoying the moment too much, like we'd opened a secret door known only to him. Mother always ran hot, he said. He's lying, Grandma spoke up. He's from a different earth, and he owns a castle under the ground. The woman he speaks of wasn't my mother, and he isn't my brother. My brother was Michael, and he died in the war. You were Mary Laurel's uncle. You should tell the truth, Bowley. Did the Prince of France ever find his cat? Well, if he's not your brother, perhaps we should go home, Dad said under his breath, and both Mom and I gave him a disgusted look. This wasn't the time or place. Oh, Mother, Mom sighed and took Grandma's hand. I'm sure everything is fine. Grandma paid no attention to Mom and waited for Uncle Bullard to respond. When he did, he shook his head slowly. And I couldn't tell if he was responding to the inquiry about the cat or out of pity for Grandma's delusions. Grandma stared sadly at her plate. That is a shame. I'm sure he missed his mother. No, I'm sure the cat and Mother are both fine, Mom said. Right, Uncle? Dad, over his limit for the morning, rolled his eyes and mouthed the words, Don't encourage her, to himself. Bowing aside, Dad believed we needed to ground Grandma in reality. To him, supporting a modern-day Prince of France hurt more than helped. Uncle Bullard's eyes fell on Dad, and then back to Grandma. It's fine. Life can be cruel sometimes. Isn't that true, my dear Helena? The table got quiet then. I mean, as a spectator, what the heck are you supposed to say to any of that? We appreciate all you've done, Uncle, Mom said after a few tense minutes. I don't know what we would have done without your help. Helena deserves the best, Great Uncle Bullard said. Dr. Seabury is wonderful, Mom replied. I rolled my eyes. Oh, come on! The whole table turned to me. Sorry, it's just, Uncle, I have to be honest with you. I don't believe Grandma has Alzheimer's. Dad's finger drumming grew so loud, so fast, it stopped me from continuing. Mom took his hand and whispered a bit too loudly, Matthew, please, we've discussed this. It's healthy that a teenage girl would want to advocate for a beloved family member. It's a sign of her budding independence and her journey to become a woman. I cringed. My parents might as well be talking about my bowel movements. It would be less embarrassing than my budding anything. With his other hand, Dad picked up his coffee mug, but didn't drink. We've been through all this, kiddo, he said, ignoring Mom. Most of life is rather mundane, and most mysteries have plain, uneventful explanations. Things aren't like the movies. It's not as romantic or interesting. Life is usually exactly as it seems. Or it isn't, Bullard said cryptically. I looked up at him in astonishment. Did Uncle Bullard take my side? It was a little hint, a small glimmer of hope that I wasn't alone with believing Grandma had the wrong diagnosis. You can't weigh in on this because you haven't been here, Bullard. Dad put his coffee down with such force droplets of coffee fell onto our untouched plates. For once, I agree. My family here knows so little about me apart from my sister, and to her, I am a haze of who I really am, Uncle Bullard said. I would like to change this. What do you say, Waverly? Wait, you would stay here with us in Barton? Dad and Uncle Bullard said no at the same time. You would come with me, Uncle Bullard said. My time in Barton was limited and had to be with college, but this? I didn't know how to respectfully respond to my great uncle. It was nice for him to offer me a job and a chance to get to know him, but he was essentially a stranger. I mean, we didn't even know where he lived. Not ready at all. She's still 17 and going to college in the fall. Dad aggressively picked up his fork and chopped into his breakfast. We need to eat. I turn 18 in a few weeks, I corrected Dad, for I had no desire to be referred to as a child. I'm practically an adult. Adults don't rush into decisions, honey, Mom said. I turned to Uncle Bullard. So do you think it's Alzheimer's or something else? It is worth investigating, Bullard explained. He touched the table and pulled his hands away, and he took a kerchief from his coat and wiped his hands. You could consult with experts. I have an entire staff at my disposal. So you work in the medical field? Asked Mom, attempting to get her answer. Because Waverly has no business in the medical field at this point. She doesn't have the education for it. Not medical, Uncle Bullard uttered with a scowl. but lucrative. She'll take my place as the second heiress to the kingdom of America, Grandma said, taking my hand in hers. I dreamt this day would come. Such a wonderful girl. You'll make me so proud. I loved Grandma so much. I wanted to make her proud, and taking care of her was the way to do it. I couldn't leave, not before I helped Grandma. Anything more would feel wrong, but I wasn't getting anywhere in Barton. Dad threw his hands in the air. Good God! Yes, Helena. She will make us all proud, Bullard told her. Grandma continued. Bowley, there's something that concerns me. There is a new man in town, and I'm certain he hasn't been vetted. I looked around for poor Kevin, and it was then I noticed the restaurant. In the heat of the conversation, I hadn't paid attention to the rest of the diner. The whole place had cleared out. Everyone was gone. Everyone. How in the world had I missed them all leaving? Where is everyone? I asked, stunned. Bullard ignored me and responded to Grandma. I will look into it, dear sister. Matthew and Simone, you have reservations about this offer, but this is up to my niece, he said. I will visit your residence tomorrow to discuss this further. And then to me, only me, for I was sure somehow I was the only person at the table who heard him, Bullard said, If you come with me, I promise to clarify everything you want to know about Helena. I will honor your decision, Waverly.